Hey there, Florida residents. Let's talk 2020 census. You probably learned about the census in school, and you might remember something about counting. Counting everyone in the United States? Ring a bell? If not, fear not, because today we're going to go beyond the basics. In the next 6 minutes, you will become a census expert. So what exactly is the census? The framers of the Constitution thought that the census was so important, they included it in Article 1. The U.S. Constitution requires that the census be completed once every decade, with the goal of accurately counting each person living within the United States borders. The U.S. Census Bureau wants to count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. The census asks for some basic information, including the number of people who live or stay at your home, their ages, gender, relationship to one another, and race or ethnicity. The questionnaire also asks if you rent or own your home or apartment. Unlike voting, residents are required by law to respond to the census. The data collected through the census is used to distribute funding and resources to states, counties, and municipalities. Based on population, the government decides how much funding to give public schools, transportation, and hospitals, for example. On average, Florida receives more than $2,000 in federal funding each year for each resident, but only if they're counted. When you multiply that by millions of Florida residents, it is an impressive sum of money. Florida is at a high risk of undercounting. In fact, it is estimated that in 2010, over 83,000 Floridians were left uncounted. The results also decide how many seats Florida gets in the U.S. House of Representatives, our number of electoral college votes during presidential elections, and how the state legislature draws its districts. Fun fact, because of population growth, Florida is predicted to gain 2 congressional seats following the 2020 census. And not to forget how this information is utilized in the private sector. A company may use census data to decide where to build a grocery store or set up a distribution center. So if you're ready to complete the census today, you can respond online, by phone, or in the mail. You should have already received a form in your mailbox with your 12-digit census ID. The process will take about 10 minutes. If you're a college student, you should respond from your address where you spent the majority of your year, regardless of any move due to COVID-19. If you fail to respond, the Census Bureau will send an interviewer to your home to collect your response. And if you don't answer your door, just a heads up. They may even visit your neighbors to collect your information through a process known as proxy response. It is important to remember that the census and census workers will never ask you for your social security number, bank or credit card information, or monetary donations. Don't fall victim to fraud. A major challenge to census outreach efforts is concern that information will not be kept private. You may have followed the debate over the last couple of years about whether to include a question about citizenship status on the 2020 census. If you never caught the end of that legal battle, there is no citizenship question on the 2020 census. The Supreme Court ruled against including the question with a 5-4 vote. But studies show that this year there's an increased concern about confidentiality and how private information might be used. And these fears have a basis in history. In the 1940s, census information was used to locate Japanese families and imprison them in internment camps. After World War II, more stringent laws were created to protect the personal information of census participants. Per Title 13 of the U.S. Code, your answers are confidential and private for at least the next 72 years. Your individual questionnaire cannot be shared with the IRS, ICE, the FBI, CIA, or any other government agency, and your answers cannot be used against you in court. If you filled out the census form for your own household, you may be wondering what else you can do. Well, just like we get out the vote during election season, you can get out the count. Especially if you're in a position to help raise awareness within historically undercounted groups like new residents, racial and ethnic minorities, or those experiencing homelessness. Consider reaching out. Folks might have questions, and you can help them get the most accurate and reliable information. The COVID-19 pandemic has created new challenges for the U.S. Census Bureau. The Bureau has delayed many of their in-person outreach efforts, making it even harder for those historically undercounted groups like low-income families, those who speak a language other than English, or rural residents to be reached. And to top it all off, the Census Bureau is working on a deadline. State population counts must be delivered by December 31st, 2020, or the Bureau will have to work with Congress to extend the deadline. By completing your census questionnaire today, you can lighten the load of the hundreds of thousands of census workers who will be deployed in the coming months to communities near you. And you might help save some taxpayer money too. Not so fun fact, the 2020 census will cost the United States about $16 billion. As our world becomes more virtual and concerns about our digital privacy increase, the census may evolve too. For example, this is the first year that you can respond to the census online. Who can say what the census will look like in 2030? But the best thing we can do today, in 2020, is to make sure everyone is informed about how their response or non-response to the census can impact them as individuals, Florida residents, and community members.